Get in trouble. Good trouble. Necessary trouble. Get in trouble. Good trouble. Necessary trouble.
Thank you, Logan Bird, for an outstanding performance of Remaining. This dance piece was choreographed solely for Congressman John Lewis's stamp unveiling today by Endalyn Taylor, Dean of the School of Dance at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. Our next speaker will be Dean Lawrence Carter, Dean of the Chapel Morehouse College. Please rise.
John Lewis believed in the truth, and for that reason, he is present with us today. Let us pray. Infinite, loving unity of all being and spirit source of universal creation. We are eternally grateful, dear Master, that John Robert Lewis realized that if we are to deal beautifully, nonviolently, and peacefully with ugliness and evil, we must band together to address tantrums of natural and cultural destruction. We give our humble but hearty thanks that John Roberts' sacrificial leadership was not blind to the tendencies of the universe toward disintegration, disorder, and disaster, and how humans are implicated in the current global climate crisis. Grant us, the lovers of participatory democracy, the moral courage to work tirelessly, as Congressman Lewis did, to establish and strengthen the Smithsonian Institution for Learning, and preserving what we have documented about British and American chattel slavery. With your infinite smile of glowing approval, dear God, we honor the Reverend Dr. Lewis for his tenderness toward our physical environment, respect for our living environment, and empathy for all cosmic citizens. In an awareness of your unending mercies, dear Lord, our Atlanta hero lived hopefully and loved being in a universe throbbing with the creation of new value. And with your strength, he lived thoughtfully, guided by knowledge that is grounded in sacred value. He lived mutually, nurturing an ever-expanding web of compassion to help co-create a world where sustainability always prevails and where freedom makes the practice of all virtue possible. So be it, and so it is. Let everyone say, Amen. Amen. You may be seated.
Thank you, Dean Carter. Ladies and gentlemen, you may take your seats. We will now have a welcome on behalf of the president of Morehouse College. Please welcome Henry Goodgame, Vice President for External Relations and Alumni Engagement at Morehouse College.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a beautiful day. To the family and friends of former U.S. Congressman John Lewis, Senator Raphael Warnock, our mayors Campbell and Franklin, and other elected officials, the U.S. Postal Service, the citizens of Georgia and the Atlanta University Center, the members and supporters of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation, and other distinguished speakers and guests. It is my profound honor to welcome you on behalf of our 12th president, Dr. David A. Thomas. On this historic day, we welcome you to the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel, named in honor of the college's most revered alumnus, and also the mentor of our honoree whose likeness is being commemorated today as we reflect upon the memory of this servant leader. We welcome global citizens everywhere to join us as we commemorate the forever stamp in honor of Congressman Lewis, a beaten yet beloved civil rights leader, the face and force of the early civil rights movement, and one of the powerful voices and speakers at the 1963 March on Washington. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we honor a man who walked with kings, but never lost the common touch. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to enjoy this day of celebration and commemoration. Welcome to Morehouse College. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodgame. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and give a big warm welcome to our Master of Ceremony for today's program, Miss Alfre Woodard.
Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, and it is a very good afternoon because we are in it and we are continuing to celebrate our good brother because his truth is marching on in us. I am so grateful to be invited into this gathering today as we celebrate the dedication of the John Lewis Commemorative Forever stamp. Forever. We're going to start by everybody rising. Please rise as the Ebenezer Baptist Church Choir grounds us with Lift Every Voice and Sing. And afterwards, continue to stand for the presentation of colors by the Midtown High School Knights Battalion and the national anthem performed by Victory Brinker.
Every voice has
I know, it took my breath away. It was like you bow in each direction. Oh, my goodness. Everybody, please be seated. And thank you, Logan Bird, the Ebenezer Church Baptist Choir, the Midtown High School Knights Battalion, and Victory Brinker. Thank you for bringing your gifts forward. Okay, now we are ready. I'm so very pleased to present Linda Early Chastain, President and CEO Emerita of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. Linda was Chief of Staff and Counsel to Congressman Lewis as he served on the Ways and Means Committee. She was a member of the founding faculty of the School of Law at Georgia State University, and she served as Executive Director of the DC Judicial Nominations Commission. Linda was also named a Congressional Fellow in the Senior Managers in Government program at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, and she is a member of the bar in DC, Florida, and Georgia, so you know she knows it all. Welcome, welcome, Linda Early Chastain.
I don't know where she dug all that stuff up. But earlier this week, I was sitting on the porch at my home in Martha's Vineyard. I was just reading the paper and watching grass grow. A woman drove by, saw me sitting, and joined me. Her name is Carlene Cardwell. I don't see Carlene often. She lives on the mainland in what we call America, in the town of New Bedford, home to a large Cape Verdean community. She comes over to the vineyard to chef and to organize and manage events. Carlene is the one who, on the day after Congressman Lewis died 3 years ago, adorned the lamppost at our home with a blue ribbon, just the shade of blue that the congressman loved. We were not there at the time, but Carlene had met the congressman at our home on a couple of occasions, and she was in the audience when he visited New Bedford about 10 years ago. She admired him greatly, and she knew he was a friend. Within 24 hours, more than 100 homeowners on the vineyard that we know of hung blue ribbons paying tribute to a life exceedingly well lived. John was so loved by so many. Carlene said to me, "We call him Morabeza." I said to her, "What on earth is Morabeza? Is it a noun? Is it an adjective? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Does he do that or does he look like that?" She explained to me that Morabeza is the Cape Verdean Creole word for friendly, casual, relaxed behavior. It is a unique way of thinking, feeling, believing, and living that lies in the hearts of and is cherished by Cape Verdeans. It is greeting everyone with a smile, never knowing a stranger, being humble, fair, honest, forgiving, and never forgetting. It is having a special ability to empathize, to care, and to take care of. Carlene said it means to be well and to receive people well, to be well with all of your neighbors, near and far, similar and different, and to take good care of all of your neighbors. John Lewis, she said, is the essence of Morabeza. It is in that spirit, the spirit of John Lewis and the spirit of Morabeza, that I bring greetings on behalf of Congressman Lewis's staff and family, and on behalf of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation, which he created just before passing. I welcome you to this special occasion, an occasion which would fill Congressman Lewis's heart with hope for our future and a genuine appreciation for each and every one of you here today. It is an occasion that would reinforce Congressman Lewis's belief in the power of good work and good trouble. I thank all of you who helped to make today possible. Welcome.
Thank you, Linda, and well done in every capacity, my sister. We are fortunate to have several dignitaries and guests of honor in the audience today, and we'd like to acknowledge them. So if you're able to stand and wave so we can see you as I call your name. Senator John Ossoff. Representative Sanford Bishop. Representative Nakima Williams. Could all local and statewide elected officials please stand and wave your hands so we can see you? There they are. Thank you, thank you. John Lewis's family and friends, please stand. So proud to have you guys here with us today. Thank you, thank you. Honorable Chris Ray, the president of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity. Hello. And all the fraternities and sororities, if you're here, stand up and wave. There they are. We appreciate your support, and your presence here today is deeply appreciated. Before we officially reveal the stamp, we'd like to acknowledge someone who was unable to join us today in person, but instead has sent a letter to be here in spirit. And so right now, I'm going to ask Sherry Frank, who's a longtime friend of a congressman and his wife, Miss Lillian, to come to the stage and read that letter. The letter is from Secretary Clinton, who was a dear friend to John Lewis, who always understood the importance of fighting for what was right. Please welcome There we are.
Congressman Lewis's life was the embodiment of the Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of a beloved community. I was extremely fortunate to have been part of his beloved community for many years. Black and white, straight and gay, Christian, Muslim, or Jew, we are all one people, one family, one house, he often told us. Millions of us were touched and enriched by this amazing man of humility and integrity. And many of us went along with him to get in good trouble, really necessary trouble. I first met John in 1982 when he was an Atlanta city councilman and spoke at a meeting of the American Jewish Committee that I had organized. We invited a group of Black and Jewish leaders to come together to discuss the renewal of the Voting Rights Act. Jewish community activist Cecil Alexander introduced John to the group. The meeting ignited a passion immediately on everybody who was at the table, remembering the long history of Jews and Blacks working together. At once, the group asked, let's form a coalition right here on the spot. And John Lewis stepped forward as co-chair, where he served for 4 years before being elected to Congress. John's lending his name to this coalition gave it instant credibility and visibility when we spoke out particularly for hate crimes legislation, for a posthumous pardon for Leo Frank, and a national holiday for Martin Luther King Jr. Using his voice as a coalition leader, John strongly denounced anti-Semitism, an important issue he continued throughout his life. I have treasured memories of marching with John. We marched together in Forsyth County against fear and intimidation. We marched together commemorating the 25th and the 30th anniversary of the March on Washington. But my most memorable time marching with John was when we marched together to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It was the 20th anniversary of the march, and Rabbi Sugarman asked us to meet at the temple first to reenact the story of the temple bombing in 1957 before we boarded the bus. And Rabbi Sugarman marched at the front of the march with John, just as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel had done in the 1960s. As I worked with John, I got to know Lillian and loved her deeply. Lillian and I discovered that our sons, my son Drew and their son John Miles, were born on the very same day, and we put together a birthday party for them. When Lillian and John worked 24/7 in his campaign, John Miles spent most weekends at my home. When John was sworn in, his son and mine were sitting in the chair with him, and Lillian and I were looking on from the gallery. They really became part of my family. I had the honor of speaking at Lillian's funeral. Throughout John's career in Congress, he continued to stay close to AJC's Black Jewish Coalition, regularly participating in our Young Leaders Retreat, often surprising everyone when he showed up for dinner, and staying late into the evening, negotiating honest and often heated discussions. Under the leadership of AJC's Regional Director, Dov Welker, the coalition remains strong. And Dov helped, as the National Director of AJC's Black Jewish Agencies, work to develop the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relations. Congressman Lewis was a founding member of that caucus. John visited Israel several times with congressional delegations, always acknowledging Israel's right to be judged fairly among the community of nations. John and Lillian were also advocates for the Freedom for Soviet Jewry. Speaking at Freedom Sunday on December 6, 1987, on the eve of the Reagan-Gorbachev summit, John addressed a crowd of hundreds of thousands and said, quote, 25 years ago, I marched here in Washington to focus the nation's attention on the injustices and oppression of segregation. Many of my Jewish friends were with me then, and today I am proud to take part in this march for freedom for your people who are oppressed in the Soviet Union. In 2017, I had the honor of introducing John at the National Council of Jewish Women's National Meeting in Atlanta when he received our Faith and Humanity Award. With a standing ovation, he left the crowd, dancing to the music of Happy. All of the women joined in, all these activists dancing with John. How can we all not smile when we think of this brave and courageous warrior, a giant in American history, dancing with joy and touching our hearts? On my last trip to DC for NCJW's Washington Institute, we met in John's office to thank him for his decades of support for women, children, and families, and especially reproductive freedom, voting rights, gun safety, and qualified judicial nominees. When I finished John just a few days before his death, I said, "Goodbye, I love you. He will always be my cherished friend and the boy from Troy." He smiled, he closed his eyes. May his memory be a blessing. And now for the words from Hillary Rodham Clinton. Bill and I were pleased to extend a warm congratulations to Congressman John Lewis's family, colleagues and friends and loved ones who are gathered together on this momentous occasion to celebrate the issuance of the John Lewis USA Forever stamp by the United States Postal Service. This is an honor so very well deserved. And while we are not able to join you in person today, we wanted to express our delight at this occasion, as well as our deep love and gratitude for our dear late friend, John Lewis. The U.S. Postal Service bestows the honor of a commemorative stamp upon very few selected Americans who have made extraordinary and enduring contributions to American society, history, culture, and environment. That is a bar that John Lewis surpassed multiple times over his life as a civil rights strategist, a freedom fighter, and a political leader. As you all know so well, John was a moral compass for the powerful and the anonymous alike. He insisted on a vision of the beloved community, a society characterized by justice and equal opportunity, where love, compassion, and respect for all individuals is the guiding principle. For John, the beloved community was not only a vision for which to strive, but also his approach for taking up the work of transforming society together, and in doing so, growing a collective sense of friendship with people from every walks of life. As he asked to all of us to take notice of every opportunity for fairness, for helping those, and to speak up to do the work to make things right, and yes, to get in good trouble. Sadly, we live in a time of great division, polarization, and partisanship. But this honor and today's celebration is an opportunity for us to pause and remember that John's remarkable life was marked by an insistence that we maintain an awareness of one another, that we come together, and that we all answer the responsibility of fighting for a more fair and just world. Bill, the U.S. Postal Service, thank you. We are grateful for creating this stamp in honor of a man whose life and legacy to always impact us even today. Thank you, my friends, and congratulations to the Lewis family and to all of Congressman's beloved community. With good cheer and warm regards, I am sincerely Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. And now, the righteous moment for which we've gathered today, the dedication of the John Lewis Commemorative Forever Stamp. To do the honors, we have Governor Ron Stroman a member of the Postal Service's Board of Governors, where he serves on the Operations and Election Mail Committees. Previously, Governor Stroman was a 20th Deputy Postmaster General, which is the nation's second highest-ranking postal executive. There, he was directly responsible for government relations and public policy, international postal affairs, sustainability, and the Judicial Officers Department. After his retirement in 2020, he worked as a senior fellow at the Democracy Fund and served as the lead for President Biden's transition team for the Postal Service. Prior to the Postal Service, Governor Stroman had more than 30 years of professional experience in government, legislative affairs, including leadership positions at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Transportation, and the Government Accountability Office. He also served as counsel and held other senior staff positions at the Judiciary Committee, the Committee on Government Operations, and the Committee on Oversight and Reform in the U.S. House of Representatives. We welcome Governor Ron Stroman.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is a thank you, Alfre, for that very kind introduction. Thank you to our generous hosts at Morehouse College and our distinguished guest speakers. Thanks to you all for your support of today's dedication. I would be remiss if I did not recognize my former boss, the former Secretary of Transportation, Rodney Slater, who has joined us here. Secretary Slater, good to see you. It's good to be back here at Morehouse. The last time I was here, my eldest son, Jared, was graduating from Morehouse College, so I am the proud dad of a Morehouse man who has joined me today. It's always a privilege to represent the 635,000 women and men of the U.S. Postal Service. And that's especially true today as we celebrate this truly remarkable man with our new Forever stamp. The photograph on the stamp was taken by Marco Grob for Time magazine. It radiates John Lewis's determination and seriousness of purpose, but it also reflects his humanity and his decency. Look carefully at how the shadow falls on the right side of his face, illuminating the left side in a way that seems to take the viewer from darkness into light, a fitting tribute to a man who sought to awaken the conscience of a country. I'll have more to say in a few minutes, but without further ado, I want to invite our other guests to join me for the official unveiling and dedication of the John Lewis Forever stamp. Get your cameras ready, because this is an opportunity to take a few photos. John Lewis was a freedom fighter. He helped redeem America's betrayal of its constitutional principles through his unshakable belief in the Christian doctrine of love operating through the tactic of nonviolence. John Meacham, the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, says in his outstanding biography, His Truth is Marching On, that John Lewis was as important to the founding of a modern and multi-ethnic 20th and 21st century America as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and Samuel Adams were to the creation of the Republic in the 18th century. John Lewis's family, his community, and his faith built the foundation of his remarkable life. But it was while listening to radio sermons of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. that John Lewis was transformed from a young man with a passion for the gospel to an activist in the struggle for racial justice. You see, in Dr. King's view, it was the responsibility of Christians to challenge the injustices of segregation. And the best way to do that was through the Gandhian method of nonviolence. Well, John Lewis implemented nonviolent protest in ways that few have in the history of our nation. He led a series of sit-ins at segregated department store lunch counters in downtown Nashville, where he and his fellow students were beaten, arrested, and gassed. Bloodied, but not deterred, John Lewis would go on to be arrested more than 40 times, refusing to post bail, believing that the moral force of his suffering would transform the contours of American society. When John Lewis spoke to the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the late Harry Belafonte called it one of the most brilliant speeches he had ever heard. John Lewis said, "I appeal to all of you to get in this great revolution that is sweeping this nation. Get in and stay in the streets of every city, every village and hamlet of this nation until true freedom comes, until the revolution of 1776 is complete. For in the Delta of Mississippi, in Southwest Georgia, in the Black Belt of Alabama, in Harlem, in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and all over this nation, the black masses are on the march for jobs and freedom, and we will not stop." Shortly after that speech, the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham was bombed, killing 4 little girls: Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Carol Denise McNair. The next year, Michael Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, and James Chaney were brutally murdered during the Mississippi Summer Project to register black voters. In 1965, Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot and killed while trying to help his mother, who was being assaulted by a group of white state troopers. It was in the face of this danger that John Lewis began the march from Selma to Montgomery. He had risked his life many times before. But as he stood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge facing a sea of Alabama troopers advancing toward him, he thought he was going to die. Despite the risk to his life, John refused to back down. He said he was prepared to die because he had made peace with the fact that his life would have served a divine purpose. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "If a man has not discovered something for which he will die, he isn't fit to live." Well, John Lewis was fit to live. And fortunately for the country, he somehow survived that day. The assault became a turning point in American history. While John Lewis was beaten severely, it was not the state of Alabama that ultimately prevailed. It was John Lewis. History honors John Lewis not just for what he did, but also for what he achieved. His efforts allowed Lyndon Johnson to push through civil rights legislation through the Congress. And in many ways, the defining character of America is the product of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. John Lewis forced our country to come to grips with its racism in ways that heretofore had not happened. We are a more democratic, compassionate, and a better nation because of what John Lewis and all who participated in the movement were able to achieve. In addition to his achievements, if you ever had a chance to meet John Lewis or even to talk to him, even for a few minutes, you know what a genuinely kind and decent human being John Lewis was. As a young lawyer working on the House Judiciary Committee, I would occasionally pass Congressman Lewis in the hall or see him on the floor. The thing that distinguished John Lewis from virtually every other member was that he always spoke. He always had a kind word, an inspirational word. As Deputy Postmaster General, he would call me into his office to talk about an issue in the 5th Congressional District. He was always determined, but always a gentleman, always kind. And it is in such contrast to what we see today, where people using race to divide our country, and even efforts to roll back some of what John Lewis achieved. But I think if John Lewis were here, he would tell us not to lose hope, but to keep pushing, because his life is a testament to the power that we all have to create a country that lives up to the ideals that John Lewis fought for. And this stamp is a reminder of that power and those ideals. Thank you very much.
Governor Stroman, we thank you for bringing the spirit of John Lewis alive for us today. Thank you. My heart is so full. How fortunate are we to have lived in the time of John Lewis? Everybody, hopefully we got to fight for everybody to learn about it in the future, but how fortunate are we to have lived it? Right now we're going to bring up back again the Ebenezer Choir, singing Order My Steps. Amen. Reverend Warnock. Reverend Warnock. Reverend Warnock, I'm glad you're not doing altar call in here today because I live in California. I could be joining Ebenezer now. Peggy Wallace Kennedy, the noted author and speaker, has been called a symbol of racial reconciliation. As the daughter of two governors from Alabama, George and Lurleen Wallace, Peggy witnessed firsthand the politics of segregation and rage that spread across the American South in the 1960s and beyond. Her memoir, The Broken Road, has been hailed as a story of a Southern soul steeped in tragedy and shame, revelation and redemption. Please welcome to this stage Miss Peggy Wallace Kennedy.
When we were young, John and I grew up and lived only 38 miles from one another. He in Pike County, Alabama, and me in Barber County, Alabama. But in the reality of our lives and for the cause of segregation, we lived oceans apart. How could I have ever known there would come a day when John would call me sister and I would call him brother? John and I would not be burdened by the history of the past. We believed in the power to overcome through love and understanding. For it is through the brotherhood and sisterhood of understanding that all of our lives matter, that can encourage each of us to join hands with others. In 2009, my journey with John began when he held my hand as we crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. For you see, one act of kindness can make all the difference in a person's life. For John Lewis, one of the greatest icons of the civil rights movement, for him to take my hand and walk with me across that bridge showed me that forgiveness, reconciliation, and unconditional love can heal a human heart and restore the soul. John was able to see people with his heart rather than his mind, and that made all the difference. Peace and love abided with his heart, for that is the man I shall always remember. Our moments on that bridge served as testaments to the power of reconciliation, of change through understanding and unconditional love. We stood together as a symbol of the inherent goodness of all mankind. John gave me the courage to step away from my past and find my own voice. Stepping away from a painful past is not always easy, but it is always right. Following our first bridge crossing in 2009, I wrote John a letter. And I told him that I had crossed many bridges in my life and that I would cross many more. But the most important bridge I will have ever crossed was the one I crossed with him. John Lewis had not only loved me for who I belonged to, but he also loved me for the person I had become. For he taught me, it is not who you are, but who you can become. John was an inspiration to every life he touched. With his words, his actions, and his unconditional love. He lived his life as a tireless warrior in the fight for a more just America. During his many decades of selfless service, he inspired so many to see the true humility and dignity of their fellow man. There are moments in our lives when we witness the true spirit of someone who manifesting itself into physical acts of love and kindness. And that moment for me was when John took my hand and walked with me across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, not only as a representative of the healing power of reconciliation and change, but as dear friends. His spirit and memory will continue to light our way forward. We need only to use our voice for truth, honesty, compassion, and against injustice. John Lewis's friendship was one of the greatest gifts of my lifetime, and I loved him and all that he was. Thank you.
There is hope. There is always hope. Our next two historic guests are both former mayors of Atlanta. Bill Campbell was the 57th mayor of Atlanta and the third African-American mayor in the city's history. And Shirley Franklin was the first African-American woman to serve as mayor of a major southern city. Let's give a resounding welcome to the Honorable Bill Campbell and the Honorable Shirley Franklin.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for Shirley and I to be here this commemoration. To John Miles and the Lewis family and to all who are here, let me say how pleased we are to be a part of this special occasion. On a personal note, I am a part of the post office family. My father worked for 25 years for the post office, as did many uncles. And the post office has a very special place with the African American community. For those of you who are young to remember and those who are too old to forget, let me just tell you that the post office hired African Americans long before many other institutions, and we stand proudly with the post office family today. When I met John Lewis almost 50 years ago, it was like meeting a transcendent figure. Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, who wrote the Declaration of Independence. But here was someone who made America live up to those noble words. And so that's why we are here commemorating John Lewis today. John had an incorruptible integrity and a moral purity which really touched so many of us and changed lives. In fact, Ambassador Andrew Young, who could not be here because he is at the UN commemorating Nelson Mandela's release, said that he was in New York, he and his wife Jean were in New York City and saw John Lewis being beaten, and they immediately sold their house and moved to Atlanta and became a civil rights icon himself, working alongside of Dr. King and John Lewis and a host of others, Reverend Abernathy, and of course was a mayor of Atlanta as well. So today we come to honor John Lewis. His courage was remarkable. Not only was he the youngest speaker at the March on Washington, but also, some of you remember, in 1961 he was one of only 13 Freedom Riders, students who got on a bus together, black and white. In Rock Hill, South Carolina, they were pulled off and John was brutally beaten. His response, he got back on the next bus and continued on so that we could all be here together today. He was arrested. It's also important for us to remember that though while he is heralded as a civil rights leader, he was also a women's rights leader, and a gay rights leader, and an immigrants' rights leader, and a workers' leader, an environmental leader. John wasn't on the right side of history. History was on the right side of John Lewis.
Amen.
I've said this before. I believe that when the history of the 20th century is written, John Lewis will stand beside Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, and Dr. King is one of the transformative freedom fighters in our generation. In the play, Don Quixote, there is a line in the song, "To be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause," where John Lewis marched into hell over and over and over so that we could be here together, and for that we commemorate his incredible life. John Lewis, thank you. You just have to say something.
I was 18 years old, freshman at Howard University. I planned to go to the March on Washington with my friends. And my mother called, and on the phone, the one phone on the hall in the dormitory, the payphone, and said no, we were going with family. And as much as I was looking forward to hearing all of the speakers, I was most intrigued to hear John Lewis. That would be 60 years ago. I was inspired by him from afar, and then had a chance to hear him speak. It wasn't just his words, it his mannerism, his courage, his humility that inspired me as a young woman to go into public service, to vote every time, to urge other people to vote. John Lewis's legacy rests with all of us. He would not only tell us to get in good trouble, and while some say when necessary, it seems like it's all day, every day, the bottom line is he would tell us that we have to get everyone out to vote and to register and to stand up and to speak up. It is with the principles that he lived in his life that we are challenged to continue to do for as long as we live. Thank you very much.
And in the final days of his life, the one thing that John wanted to emphasize was how important it was for us to vote. And of course, Georgia, having voted, we have the two best U.S. senators anywhere, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. Please stand again. The direct result of John Lewis and the Voting Rights Act. Thank you.
Thank you. We love our mayors. Okay, right now I am just beside myself to present our next performer, the legendary Mae Fikes, the voice of Selma. She led protest marches, freedom songs, ushering in the change. She was born into a family of gospel singers, and she belonged to SNCC. And she was with John Lewis on Bloody Sunday, that infamous march from Selma to Montgomery. Later, she joined the Freedom Singers with Matthew Jones, Cordell Reagan, and Emory Harris, and she has continued singing for the freedom and using her voice to empower the Black community every day since. It is my great honor to introduce the great Mae Fikes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. God bless you together now, okay? It is a pleasure to be here with you this evening to share the stories of a man whom I love so dearly. And I have to talk slowly because I don't want to cry. But John Lewis, my brother, I call him my buddy, my pal, my friend, brought me to this place where I am today, singing a cappella and traveling the country, singing the old spirituals. As a kid, I promised God that once I got grown, these spirituals I wasn't going to do anymore. John made a lie out of it. I did that because I looked around and it was all sad songs, and I didn't understand. But today, I truly understand. And I got a chance to thank my brother, 2020. Montgomery, Alabama, and here we were at the state capitol. And we walking slowly together, preparing for dinner. And I caught him by his arms and I said, John, and he's Betty. I said, you know, I never got a chance to thank you. For what, Betty? For all this good that you have done for me. I met you when I was 14 and 15 years old. I don't know if I got into the movement or the movement got into me. My brother in Annapolis, the Dr. Reverend Tom Brown, said, Betty, stay calmly active and actively calm. So the reason I had to give my brother thanks, because in Selma, Alabama in 90, he in Faith and Politics was in Selma, Alabama. And he called for me to come to First Baptist. And I knew he was going to ask me to sing. I didn't feel bad because I knew there was going to be music. I hadn't sung a cappella in over 20 years. I walked in, I didn't see a choir. I didn't see a pianist. So I went to the very back of the church, sat there while my heart was beating fast. Please, Lord, don't let him call me. Found out he was with Faith and Politics. He got up and said, in Birmingham, I told you the story of the movement of Birmingham, the music of Birmingham. Montgomery, I told you the story of the music, of the movement. But here in Selma, Alabama, it was this little skinny little girl, my heart. So now you got to go with me today because I'm in the same place, because everybody was asking, Betty, what are you going to do when you don't understand when I say I don't know? I leave it all in God's hands. So that particular day, I was at the same place then that I am right now. Giving honor to my brother. I've been thinking about this for the longest because I want to know to myself what my life would have been like if it had not been for John Lewis. 14 years old, when I was singing, they asked, what freedom songs we all doing in the 60s? We didn't open up church with freedom songs. Our freedom songs was, shine on me. That's what we were doing back then. You know how devotion used to be. I travel today telling the people the spirit of the movement is gone. So when we look around, we got to get back to the old landmark. We got to get love and spirituality back once again. And I stayed here because I traveled with John, watching him give love even when people mistreated him. He would smile. I tried to be like that. I want you to know it's very hard. So I come to tell you today, a little hoarse and a little tired. But that day I sung for John, a song that I had never sung, but I had heard it before. And it was, I've been in the storm so long. I've been in the storm so long. I've been in the storm so long, but I'm trying to make heaven my home. So today I'm just going to do little medleys, what I used to do for John. Okay? Because God specializes. Have you any river that you can, any seas uncrossable? And have you any mountains, I would like these, that you can crumble through? Specializing in things thought impossible, and He will do what no other power, Holy Ghost power, can do. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn through the storm. Oh, take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on. And then I heard my grandmama say, see, my grandmother that raised me after my mother died was 113 when she died in 1984. So all these songs that I said I would never sing again as a child, I got from her. And she would sit like when the church was bombed in Birmingham. She said, oh, Lord, have mercy. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Have mercy. Lord. So that's what I'm giving to the next generation. If you don't have a song in your heart, oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. Over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go on to my Lord and be free. So those were the melodies that I tried to get away from. Jesus, keep me near the cross. I said, Lord, if I hear it one more time that way, I'm going to scream. Jesus, keep me. And now every time I look around, I'm saying, Jesus, keep me. Jesus. Then somebody said, oh, Lord. With Peggy here, friends that I've met through John Lewis. So we're going to close my set with everybody standing singing a freedom song for John. Ain't going to let nobody turn us around. Oh, ain't going to let nobody. Come on. Say me. Ain't gonna let nobody. I'm gonna, yeah. Oh, don't you let nobody. Lord.
Betty Mae Fikes. Yes, thank you, Sister Betty. How deep is our cultural DNA? God bless. Okay. I'm just going to say Michael Collins. Michael Collins, Chief of Staff, to say the very least, to John Lewis while he was in Congress. In this role, he managed legislative activities and worked with other leaders and interest groups to pass laws that have improved the lives of all Americans. You know, your chief is your right and your left hand, your right and your left foot. And Michael stood with the congressman every step of the way. Today, Michael is chairman of the board of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation, which is doing so much to build on their legacy of purposeful living, civic engagement, and protecting human and civil rights for everybody. I am so grateful for Michael Collins, for everything that he's done, and for everything he is doing now. So let's bring him to the stage to thunderous applause, Michael Collins.
Good afternoon. This is another surreal moment to behold in the life and legacy of Congressman John Lewis. And it is in this moment that I want to acknowledge the Lewis family. If I can ask Grant and Sam to stand. These are his two brothers. Congressman Lewis loved his family. I'd like to ask the entire Lewis family to please stand. They have been family members through and through. It has not been a place that the congressman has spoken and has been paid tribute to that they haven't traveled all the way from Troy, Alabama, and Florida and beyond. They recently lost a family member, Anthony David Tyner. Lewis family, Mimi, Willie, and Rhonda, our prayers are with you. God bless you. For 34 years, Congressman Lewis had a dedicated and loyal staff that loved him to the moon and back. And he loved and treasured each one of them. I would like to ask the staff of Congressman John Lewis to please stand. Thank you. I would like to thank dear old Morehouse, my alma mater, President David Thomas and Dean Lawrence Carter, for allowing us to have this ceremony here today. It was in this very chapel in 1998, as a student, I first heard Congressman Lewis speak when he addressed our freshman class. Later, we had the opportunity to meet this great, kind, brilliant, legend, leader, public servant in person. I was awestruck. Never in my mind could I have imagined that I would be standing here today and sharing some thoughts about a man who many of us has had the privilege to serve and who we all loved and respected. As I look into the audience, the words of Congressman Lewis come to mind. You all look good. So beautiful. You all do. You really do. You look fresh and clean. I wish you could see yourselves. You know that he is beaming from up above. You see, for me, this day is both history and fate, important for two reasons. First, one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had was when Congressman Lewis was in the hospital during COVID. He wanted to discuss end-of-life plans. Although we remained optimistic, he was also pragmatic. My tendency would have been to brush it off and say, "We don't have to talk about this now, sir." But instead, I listened. He told me that he didn't know what kind of funeral he would be able to have because it was COVID, but he knew we would figure it out. He went on to give me some instructions about the service, then stopped in mid-sentence and said, "You're not writing this down." He knew me, and that I forgot a lot of things. But I said, "I got you, sir. I got it." So as we're assembled here today, your presence is a celebration of his life and legacy that I know he wished for with his beloved constituents, friends, and family. Thank you for being here. The second reason this day is so important is that what many of you don't know is that Congressman Lewis was an avid stamp collector. Now, what I will tell you, for many years, neither did I. All I know is that around the time a new stamp was released, he made me drive him to the post office to get a sheet or two of newly released stamps. I was just being a dutiful staff member and honoring the request, but after several years of trips to the post office, I finally caught on. Sometimes I could also be a little slow sometimes, you know. Whenever a new Forever stamp came out, he was like a kid in a candy store, purchasing more than he could ever use. There were so many stamps he loved, too many to count. Generations of his staff in both the district and DC offices could tell you about the countless trips to every post office from Atlanta to the House Office building to buy stamps and post his mail. In particular, I vividly remember in 2017 when the U.S. Postal Service released the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture stamp. He could not contain his excitement or buy enough. When I began to think about the true meaning of this occasion, I thought about how stamps and letters became an important trajectory of the Congressman's life. I'm sure his sister and brothers here today, Sam and Grant, would tell you about mail delivery and what it was like on the farm in Troy, Alabama, when a teenage boy, John Lewis, wrote a letter to Dr. King. He sealed it tight, placed a stamp on it. When it actually received a letter in response from Dr. King, it solidified his belief in the postal system. From that time until his last days, he still wanted to put stamps on bills and send them off. He wanted to touch the mail, write the letters, and collect his stamps. As you can imagine, that when it was time to gather Congressman Lewis things from his home, his good friend Earl Burke will tell you that there was enough stamps to fill a box. So I want to thank Linda Chastain, Artist Montgomery, Senior Event Planner for the U.S. Postal Service, Ron Stroman, the Citizen Stamp Committee, and the U.S. Postal Service for making this day possible. I also would like to give an appreciation to the generations of U.S. postal workers for their hard work and dedication to delivering many pieces of communication that left an indelible mark on the Congressman and sowed the seeds of his faith and love for the U.S. Postal Service. Congressman Lewis's son, John Miles, and I can attest that out of all the great and kind tributes bestowed upon him, the release of this forever postal stamp is an honor that would leave him speechless and completely overwhelmed. Today, I'm so honored to stand here before you as the former Chief of Staff for Congressman John Lewis of 21 years, and now the board chair of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. Congressman created this organization to ensure that his principles and vision are kept alive. Since his passing, we have seen there have been a lot of triumphs, but there have also been a lot of setbacks. We have to stay vigilant and keep our eyes on the prize. We cannot get lost in a sea of despair, and we cannot succumb to the seeds of discord. And on this day, as Congressman Lewis would say, I ask you to recommit yourselves to getting in good trouble, necessary trouble. Thank you for loving. Thank you for loving and continuing to lift up the boy from Troy and Georgia's own Congressman John Lewis.
Thank you, Michael. You continue to do our good brother proud. It is my special privilege right now to present the beloved son of the Congressman, John Miles Lewis.
What's right. I'm just, that's heavy right there. That's heavy. It's such an honor to see my father commemorated in that way. A lot of people have spoken about my father and with just grace and passion. And for him to be on the stamp, and I don't think really a lot of people realize in this day of an age of technology how emails and texts are so impersonal. Graphology is the study of personality to one's handwriting. Writing a letter was something intimate. It's something is a conscious effort that someone chose to do. You used to have to get in your car, go to the post office, get you some stamps, come home, find a pen, find paper, find an address, and write. And you took that time because that person or whoever you're writing to meant something. That means something. That means something. It's just as well as Michael said, imagine being 18 writing a letter to Martin Luther King. Not only just writing the letter, but to get a response in the mail. A stamp in the right-hand corner of an envelope. And the response was one of the most busiest and important people in human history. Writes you back and asks you to join the movement. That's a historical change right there, just from a stamp being put on 2 envelopes. Changed the course of history. It's something in that way. We need to get back to being more communicative through us, not just texting and emojis. That doesn't really show emotion. You can see what people feel about you, love you, because it's their time that you take. I mean, even children write to Santa Claus and just sign the North Pole. You know what I mean? I mean, it's something to show that they've been a good kid all year. It's something sincere about this. And it's incredible to me to just understand when you look back at the postal that the United States Postal Service issued their first 2 stamps in 1847, recognizing Benjamin Franklin and George Washington. That wasn't until April 7th, 1940. That's 7 years shy of a century. That Booker T. Washington was honored by the United States Postal Service as the first African American to be placed on a stamp. Then the Black Heritage Stamp Series meant to recognize the accolades and achievements of African Americans' contributions to this country, was initiated in 1978. My father's image is now in the annals of postal history, along with Paul Robeson, W.B. Du Bois, Harriet Tubman, Benjamin Banneker. The list goes on. So much on it's 100 plus. That's a formidable statement. From the son of a sharecropper, from the son of sharecroppers to being a civil rights revolutionary, to be considered the conscience of the Congress. That's a journey that started with an envelope, a letter, and a stamp. And now we're here. And for that, my father, yes, I remember us going to the post office and the new Tubman's out, the new. It was like Jordans. He loved his stamp. It was crazy, but that's Pop, so I can't, you can't be mad at that. But I'm just looking at it being that he was a philatelist, which is a person who partakes in the collection of stamps. And for the Postal Service to honor my father this way, I would say, for him, it would be one of the highest forms of philately for my father. And Pops, forever, you're in my heart. I love you, I love my family, I love my friends. And so did my father, and so did my mother. And whenever you get one of these stamps, do me a favor, take that time. Go get an envelope. Get you a piece of paper, find you a pen. Somewhere in your house, you know you got them somewhere. You know they're somewhere in there. In a drawer in the back or something, just find one and just write a letter. Just write one. Let somebody get something in the mail other than bills. Let somebody know somebody cares about you and you care about them. Okay? And on that note, thank you for your time. And I appreciate you all. And I love y'all.
Well done, John Miles. Next, I am thrilled to present one of our most popular and honored gospel vocalists. She will be blessing us with He's an On-Time God. Please welcome the uber-talented Dottie Peoples.
Let the church say amen. Say amen again. Say amen one more time. What an occasion. And you know what? Every time I was with Congressman, he'd be on the edge of the seat, ready so he could dance at the end of On Time God. So some kind of way we got to figure out how to do his little shout at the end. But how many of you know he's an on-time God? Come on, we're celebrating today. Get on your feet and rock with me for about 4.5 minutes. Woo! Rock! Come on, put your hands together. Listen. He's an on-time God. Yes, he is. Oh, 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 oh. Yes, he is. Job said, but he is. I'll tell you, he is. Yes. Let's get a witness up in here. You can ask the children of Israel trapped at the Red Sea by that mean old Pharaoh and his army. They had water all around them, and Pharaoh on their track. Out of nowhere, God stepped in. He cut a highway just like that. Now let me tell you, he's an on-time God. Yes, he is. Oh, 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 oh. Yes, he is. Job said, but he, I'll tell you, he, yes. Can we get one more witness up in here? You can ask the 5,000 hungry souls he fed on the banks of the river with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. What a miracle! A heap of oil for the multitude. Oh, what he did way back then, he'll do today for me and you. Now let me tell you, he's an on-time God. Yes, he is. Oh, 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 oh. Yes, he is. Job said, but he'll, I'll tell you, he'll. Yes. Now I want you to look at your neighbor and say, baby, whatever you're going through, the God that we serve is on time, on time. He'll step right in, on time, on time. He's on time, on time, on time. He's an on-time God. Yes, he is. Oh, 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 oh. Yes, he is. Job said, but he'll, I'll tell you, he'll. Can I get a witness up in here? He's an, yes, 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 yes. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Oh! That's for John.
Yes, Lord. It is with tremendous admiration, respect, gratitude, and joy that I invite our last speaker to the stage to give us our benediction. He is the senior pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. He is the 5th and the youngest person to serve as Ebenezer's senior pastor. He is our Reverend Brother Senator and our friend. Please welcome Reverend Brother Senator Raphael Warnock.
Well, the choir has sung, and I guess it's time to raise an offering. Let us stand. As my spiritual mentor, the Reverend Dr. Lawrence Edward Carter Sr. would say, bow your heads toward your hearts. And now, gracious God, as we lift this prayer, we are mindful of the spirit of John Robert Lewis, who reminded us in word and through example that there are many ways to pray. He reminded us that a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and for our children. John Lewis believed that democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. The notion that each of us is a child of God, that we have within us a spark of the divine, and therefore we ought to have a voice, a vote in the future of our great nation and our destiny within it. And so bless us now to carry out his vision. When he crossed that bridge, he had no reason to believe that he could win. But by some stroke of destiny mingled with human resilience, he crossed a bridge and became a bridge. And we are the blessed inheritors of that grand vision. And so now, may future generations say the name of the boy from Troy, who as a young man thought he might spend his life preaching sermons, but instead he became a sermon. May we hear it. May we live it again and again in these difficult days when there is an all-out assault on his vision. Remind us to remind America that we cannot remember John Lewis and dismember his legacy at the same time. Help us to be vigilant, steadfast, honest, true in the work of standing up for workers, for women, for a vote, for a voice. And now as we leave this place, even as we walk out, put running in our feet so that we might make real the promises of democracy. We lift this prayer in the name of the God who loves us into freedom and frees us into loving. Let the people of God say amen.
Just a few more moments. Right now, we'd like to bring to the stage the distinguished family of John Lewis in front of the stamp to capture this historic moment. You always bring the power, Pastor Warnock. Thank you. What a glorious day. What a glorious day. Here, we're going to go in front of the stand. Come on up. Come on, everybody. While you come up, I'll start some last-minute announcements. The whole family, come on up. Come on up. And while the family's coming to take an historic picture, let me just say that all of our guests and participants today, we thank you for making this truly a great occasion. Dr. Lawrence Edward Carter, Henry Goodgame, and everybody here at Morehouse, thank you for hosting today's ceremony and making us feel so welcome. Governor Ron Stroman and U.S. Postal Service, thank you for choosing to celebrate John Lewis with this incredible honor. Pastor Warnock, the Ebenezer Choir, Sherry Frank, Michael Collins, Linda Early Chastain, Peggy Wallace Kennedy, Bill Campbell, Shirley Franklin, and John Miles Lewis, thank you for coming to the center of the unbroken circle. Our brilliant performers, Logan Bird, Victory Brinker, Betty Fikes, Dottie Peoples, our honor guard from the Midtown High School Knights Battalion, thank you for lifting us today. And of course, and finally, each of you here in the audience, you have made this a memorable experience. Photographer, you ready? What do you need? Somebody stay.
more shot, guys. One more. Here we go. One more shot. Here we go. All right, good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody, remember you can buy your John Lewis stamps at the Postal Service's retail booth. It's located right out the front entry in a large tent. I have enjoyed being your MC today. Everybody have a good summer and hydrate, hydrate, hydrate with water.